Okay, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Birrugun Dunn Velasco, speaking on systems building and the Goori language Renaissance. In this talk, he writes, I propose a radical shift in how we conceptualise decolonisation. Too often, I feel, in the collective zeitgeist, we reference Marx, Lenin, or Eurocentric ideology as our liberation framework. But if we are serious about decolonisation as a buzzword operating within the paradigm that our languages must be, our principal theoretical tool, as an extension of our laws and responsibility to our kin, country and land, I call this systems building, the extensions and manifestation of our real political power in the ongoing project of the emancipation of our Goori cultural and political systems. This calls for what I call a Goori Renaissance, whereby thinking and operating in an immersive Gumbaynggirr context will spark development into new ways of thinking that we can't even conceive due to the limitations of the present. I pay homage to the Māori Renaissance of 1974. I'll also reference Fight for Liberty and Freedom, Professor John Maynard. This will be a prime call out to our young people, arguing that if we do not take radical steps now to create and harness a collective decision to save our languages, like what happened in Maori Society, then we are doomed.
Does that sound too heavy, Jude? No, thank you. I might just have some technical difficulties here, just trying to work that out, but appreciate your patience. Yeah. Did that sound too heavy, Jude? No,
Save what?
That's the other one. Now you've seen all my other work, now I guess it's good. So that, you know. Adobe Creative Cloud. He's not supposed to see that. No, I'm joking. I figured it out, there we go. Swap displays. Away. Definitely. Alright, you can see that now, cool. I'm just going to get some water. Darren for your time, everyone. Just firstly, before I begin, I'd just like to say that I'm very humbled and honoured to be speaking to all of you all today, and particularly by the invitation from God, and not only Ngāti Bulleri Wini Gawabin, but before I begin, I'd just like to say, as an uncle who's present here today, I'm pretty nervous because he's here, but I'll just try my best, and yeah, I hope that whatever I yarn about today, it sort of rings true. I'm still sort of in the process of thinking it through and trying to connect the dots. So it's yeah, early days of this sort of thinking, so I appreciate you all bearing with me too. But before I begin though, just like to say, Yada Gala Nurangla, Imani Gundi Yadi Guyubin, Yada Gala Nurangla na Nimandi Gawabin. Gilagam bin, Juroy bin, Nimani Gundi Kirwa, Yida Yilana, Yida Jambal, Yadi Uri Gundi Wajara. Just like to pay honour and respects to all our old people, all our ancestors, all our old women, all our people, and just saying always Uri Gundi, our country, our land. And just like to extend as well an immense honour to our international mob that are here too. It's really lovely to hear all of your words as a young man have been very inspiring, a lot of my, just inside my head. So it's just actually really profound to actually hear your stories, hear you mob here in the flesh. I can begin now. So this is not going to be another nation building presentation, I hope. No. But acknowledging that there's obviously been a couple of consistent themes over the past couple of days, and forgive my apologies of absence here. I haven't been able to make it due to some other work proceedings. But I'm just assuring you, I hope this is not another nation building presentation. Hope not. Who am I? My name is Birrugun, I'm a Kelly. Namnuri Baraman, Nyari Puravadel, Dulwe Puma Mirala. My family comes from a place called Yellow Rock, just down the road Urunga. I'm a Kelly and a Harvey, but also we're Kellys that go back to Bellbrook, like Uncle Ray here, just another sort of arm of the tree, I suppose. And I've been fortunate over the past couple of years to have some proximity to many people who I feel have been very vital to our people's history of resistance and liberation. I've often sat down with them, annoyingly so, probably to them, as a sycophant, probably asking them a lot of questions in the space of inquiry and curiosity about the many nuances of the past, to sort of understand that, like, if we cannot remember that past, then we're condemned to repeat it. Notably, and our goal here is here today as well. I'll be probably referencing many times if he doesn't mind. Not sure. And also just giving some acknowledgement to Mr. Ray Peckham, who passed on about 3 weeks ago. You very incredible man too. But moreover, I'm also very passionate about disseminating this history to our young people, so that they can understand that they come from a strong, a lineage of resistance, a lineage of defiance against monolithic oppressive structures. That they connect to a place of positionality that refers to time, and that we as Goori people have always been connected to a place of time. I'm confident, I'm extremely passionate about building our people up and our communities up and our spaces of consciousness up, so that we have strong sense of self. We have an awareness of where we've come from, so that we may better know where we're going. But also at the same time, I quote Dr. Khalid Muhammad, black people are a people of rhythm and spirit. So not only do I seek to provide education, but I also wish to provide inspiration. So I'm just going to flag what we're going to be talking about over today after I finish my sort of introduction. The maxim that it takes to raise a village, takes a village to raise a warrior is certainly true. And I am extremely grateful to the nurturing warmth that our language community has gifted myself and many others over the past 5 years. I would say I feel like an acolyte to Dr. Grey, to Uncle Gary, and to Goa Clark, and feel eternally forever in debt to their tutelage. And I hope one day I can return to the breeding school as a secondary teacher teaching history. Learning language is a birthright. However, the circumstances of the present demand it to be a responsibility, and that is the burden that we all, as all Indigenous people, share and know very intuitively. The present situation, however, must be met with thought, intention, and strategy, lest our efforts be for naught. I'll be expanding upon this later at the conclusion of my piece today as well, which is primarily my stated aim of sharing these yarns today too as well. Also here are some of the various institutions I've worked over the years. I'll be drawing from my experience of them too as well. I'm gracious to the opportunities and the support they've gifted me over the years as well. I'm currently doing don't crucify me please, a degree in linguistics at University of New England, and I'm also a member of the UTS longitudinal, the UWS longitudinal study at the Gumbaynggirr Gumbaynggirr Freedom School too. So yeah, that's that. And I guess another hat I wear is I am now the coordinator of the Aboriginal Language and Culture Nest under the ACG, the Gumbaynggirr, and I work a bit with Young Valley Mob too as well. So I've been doing that for the past couple of 3 months too. So please don't cruise fun, stirring. I'm now just going to signpost the gist of what we're sort of yarning about today. I've sort of done a brief little formula over some of my thoughts about how our Indigenous epistemologies are sort of developed. Our Mangum is our ourr, and obviously I feel Goa Troy here would really resonate with this diagram too as well. I know all the yarns he says for young fellas, he always spins a similar yarn too. Jagan is our country, and our Nawa or Bija is our language. And we all know that our epistemologies are always interrelated, you know, intrinsic. You've probably heard this 1,000 times, you know, knowing that our knowledge systems are all interconnected and intrinsic. I don't believe anything I'm saying today is anything new. I think you have found it probably reiterated quite a lot in the other speakers, particularly today over the past 2 days as well. We understand, you know, I realise as well I may be hypocritical in denouncing Eurocentric frameworks and modalities, and then at the same time using them to state my case. However, I think that is more to the point that it further exemplifies my position and in continuity of the long-standing tradition of using their tools to beat them at their own game. I'd also like to note I'm speaking to the urgency of the present, and I'm thinking about the future inheritance of our future generations, and I'm responding to that with some disgruntledness to the present. Essentially, as Uncle Ray said before, we need more soldiers. We need more soldiers in the trenches. And that's the sort of gist of why I'm sort of talking to you more today as well. I'll just go through this signpost stuff. So we'll be visiting Theoryland. Briefly, it won't take too long, I hope. I just feel it's just important to make some key assertions. We'll then be honouring our people's history of resistance and how language has always been a part of it. I'll be providing a partial analysis of the current circumstance facing our people. However, I'll not be articulating and unpacking the discourse of the last 20 years in our community. I feel that's a yarn for another time, and I'm happy to have a stab at it, but I'm sure someone way smarter than I could probably do a better job. And then finally, I'm just going to I'll be sending a message to primarily our young people. And as I said, this is the main reason why I sort of wanted to spin this yarn. And now I'm going to begin now. So, Goori Renaissance. It's really strange, like I finalised sort of early thoughts about this in a completely different context, and I think it's pretty common. Often we think about our country, we think about our home, but especially when we're not there. And I was fortunate, as Nyapaluk, you would have heard earlier, this is her grandfather's country. I was fortunate to spend a month at a language centre over there in a remote community. And you know, lots of yarns came about from that too, about temporality, about, you know, often we eschew the north to be like, oh, they're just experiencing what we went through around this way like 100 years ago, and so on and so forth. But it was a lot more nuanced and a lot more complicated than that. But I was thinking, should I yarn about this? Like, it was crazy. What brought this yarn about was like, the mob over there, you go over there, like, one big street, shops, banks, doctors, rangers, but everything in language. And I said to Mom, I was like, hey, isn't this what we want? Like, isn't this what can I swear? Isn't this what we're fucking trying to fucking do back home? Like, this is everything. Like, and this is cool though, because the houses have fucking cages around everything. The living conditions are fucking, men are dying at the fucking age of 43. Like, it's so fucking warped. But yeah, this is everything we're espousing in terms of, you know, decolonisation, our own fucking cultural and economic systems that may manifest. But it's just fucking weird, you know? So what a bit of a brief yarn, like, they got their main language, lingua franca, like modern papa. Everyone speaks it, and it's just tricky, you know, because here down home, obviously that's what we're trying to get to, and I feel, you know, very inspired by the Te Reo Maori movement, mad props to that, in terms of, we're not there on that line yet, but still to see that future dystopia, you know, of an oppressive regime, of communities being forced to live basically sentenced to death. Like, nobody wants to live in war there. People are being made to live there. Right before your very eyes. It was very, it was a very, very profound experience. But yeah. Part 1. Systems building towards a Goori Renaissance. Okay, so we're just going to skim through the theory part so I can just get to the gist of what I'm going to talk about. I have really bad news. I don't know if you know this, but we might live in a colony. Maybe. No, I'm joking. But, yeah, I mean, look, we all know what's colonialism. You can call it whatever you want. It's patriarchy. Colonialism is not a thinking machine, nor a body endowed with reasoning faculties. It is violence in its natural state, and it will only yield if confronted with greater violence. And violence can be anything. Violence can be resistance, violence can be thought, violence can be our languages. Just us existing in our language, I think, is a form of resistance. It is a world that is unpenetrable to the power and modalities of the colony. I just made it up on the spot, but I don't know if it sounds cool. No. Decolonisation is always a violent event, but it's not also always guns, it's also grammar, thought, and time. Hegemony comes from the Greek word hegemon, and in its ancient use it refers to the dominance or leadership of one city-state or group over others, such as Athens, the Athenian hegemony in the Delian League. Gramsci, who's a G, is my homie. He was an Italian theorist from the 70s, and it refers to the cultural and ideological or economic dominance of one group over others, often maintained through consent rather than force. And we can note Uncle Noam Chomsky, manufacturing consent. The function is to ensure, entertain, and inform, and to inculcate individuals with values, beliefs, and codes of behaviour that will integrate them into the institutional structures of larger society. The mission is hegemony. The church is hegemony. The colony is hegemony. It is hegemony in its every insidious manner that the colony circumvents us each day. It is the daily war waged on our minds in subtle or not so subtle manners. It is the gun, it is the boot, but it's as well it is the pen and the legislative arm. I've just given a sort of classical Marxist analysis of superstructure, take it that what you will. I love it what Uncle Kevin says there too. He says that white man's law is only law because he has the gun and the gall to call it law. Pretty much sums it up pretty acutely. We know this. We know this intuitively. We know this because this is often how our histories are suppressed and distorted and ostracized from us as people. We know this is how our languages have been represented via linguicide and as a logical extension of the colonial extractive process that is inherent to all of our academic institutions. We know this is how hegemony and the colony is so ever-present. We cannot even imagine a world outside of it. We love English so much, and we don't even know it. It is more plausible, for example, and I know what Mr. Fisher, rest in peace, it is more plausible to envisage the end of the world than it is to envisage the end of capitalism. And I must note, I'm not suggesting or being prescriptive to any ideology, as you'll know throughout the rest of this piece too. What is decolonisation? Good question. And if you're adjacent to leftists or radical or indigenous spaces, you've probably heard it thrown around a bunch, so much so it's probably a buzzword. This has caused me some sort of frustration, and hence partially why I developed this discussion today, because people often purport to speak all the time on our systems, our laws, our customs, our ceremonies, but I beg the question to ask, how can we suggest this without knowing our language? I'm not being critical, nor denouncing the activities of our brothers and sisters on the front lines of the cities. I'm merely stating that our real front lines is back home, here, in our communities, and we really, and I mean really, need everyone to come home. As Professor Watergo states, being active citizens in our own communities. I'm referring to our own infrastructure, as was noted by Sister Rebecca Jordan Yadi. I'm referring to our own infrastructure, the self-determination of our black nations, the reconstitution of political and cultural systems, and my thesis of today's yarn is you cannot have actual decolonisation without the centricity to our languages. And I'm being really real on the East Coast, we have not really had that yet, in terms of widespread movement towards immersion. Like, you know, I'm just being really real. We don't even know what fluency is, you know, as we were just talking about. And I'm strongly inspired by the Te Reo Maori movement, and I wish to call upon our youth to actualise immediate action around a mass movement around immersion. Otherwise, we are doomed. Our best and brightest live elsewhere, and yes, we need them if it is to be multidimensional. Of course, revolutionary and counter-hegemonic activities require people in all different spaces, but our language needs more soldiers. This is nation building, this is tangible, and this is the future of our people at stake. Okay, so we know what hegemony is, blah, blah, blah. Hegemony is omnipotent, every president. But how do we respond to that? It's our infrastructure, as Sister put before, it's our institutions. Essentially, I think where we build our community so much to the point where the power structure of the colony is irrelevant. This is our world, they're just living in it. Immersion in our language and by extension our institutions, being physical manifestations of our own counter-hegemony, allow for a world where we have safety for the colony. I don't like to draw upon interpersonal experience, but you know, I just know that, say, when Goa and I, or Jinder and I are talking in language, the colony doesn't matter. And it's such a strong feeling that nothing can take that away from you. This is our world and they just live in it. We can understand this, that language shapes thought, and therefore an epistemology within our immersion of language allows for new thinking. Thinking that we cannot even conceive or comprehend due to the limitations of our colonised minds now, etc., the impacts of English. And I think it's pretty fair and reasonable to be real with ourselves about that. We are assimilated people. Decolonisation is a psychological process, just as much as it is a spiritual and a philosophical process. You know, all of these patterns and systems of learnt behaviour take decades, take years to undo. And if we're really real with ourselves, it just takes time. So, right, we got the theory, we got our theory down. Was that terrible? Yahweh? Was that painful? Thank you. Funny thing, part 2, we're going to go to history now. Auntie Kath Walker, Goa, and the uncles and a lot of people may remember her, of course. But funny yarn, out of all the people with ASIO files, she had the biggest one, like this big. I've seen uncles' ASIO files and Gary Foley's ASIO file, but Auntie Kath's is the biggest. That's another yarn. So, we've got all the theory stuff out of the way. How do we get to our history? Well, we inherit a history. We inherit a history of our people continually being bold and courageous in the face of monolithic oppressive regimes, like power structures imposed. Our people have always interfaced and responded to the conditions brought on by colonial occupation, so therefore we inherit a sense of time. We all come from somewhere, and that is important, and I feel just like a basic, like philosophical yarn with Goories, we all know this intuitively. That's why we always ask, like, who's your mob, where you're from, blah, blah, blah. That's inferring a sense of time. And even when the old people thought, like, Nadi, Jaramba, all that, it's all inferring a sense of time. We have some sense of responsibility to that history, though, just as we do to the future. And I'd like to pay respects to the lineage of the many people who have made it possible for us to be today. Let their names be remembered, and let us always remember their sacrifices. I'm not going to be going into great substantive detail over the last sort of 230 years of our resistance. I'll just be using one highly important one, I think, a case study to sort of springboard my thesis upon. However, the implications are numerous and vast. Our resistance has been and will always be very diverse, multidimensional, and has emerged in many different incarnations over the years. And of course, they're indicative of responding to that historical context. Just like our people are, as Goories across this part of the world and this part of the land, we're all very diverse, we're all very different, but that's okay. I think our old people embraced diversity of thought, diversity of subjectivity, really understands and respects your truth is your truth, my truth is mine, but that's okay. And I think I would give $100 to anyone who can name everyone up here, and everyone, including you. Go off. No, if everyone was at South Africa, I'm not going to say that. Yeah. And apologies if I didn't include everyone. If you want more, suss out the heroes of Goori Resistance on gooriweb.com. So yes, I'm going to go right back to the start though, to I suppose what we can consider to be the first modern incarnation of our blackfellow organised political resistance, you know, and that's the AAPA. Funny you'll note the dates. I'll get into that in a sec, but the AAPA is another annal of history that's often not spoken about, forgotten, just as all of our resistance history is, you know, like how many people know about Dunn, how many people know about Gumbaynggirr, how many people know about, you know, Russell Means, how many people know about in Turtle Island, South Turtle Island, like Lautaro, etc. And obviously these more were responding to their historical circumstances too. Pretty deadly graphic as well, for my sake. The context in which the AAPA was founded was that it was founded in the early part of the 20th century in Sydney. In Surrey Hills there was a lot of maritime workers, a lot of like African American, African diasporic people that were coming through. They were bringing ideas of Marcus Garvey and of Toussaint Louverture and of other anti-imperialist people, and it sort of culminated. We'll be following the trajectory of one individual in particular, Fred Maynard, the founding member, but it culminated in 1907 when a famous boxer, one of the first sort of black boxers by the name of Jack Johnson, came to fight in Sydney. And he was, you know, sort of like the Sonny Luston or the Cassius Clay of his time, you know, like he was like the Muhammad Ali, you know, real radical. And so this Fred Maynard fellow, who's a Warramai lad, amongst that sort of lower working class, wharfies, you know, inner city, rough stuff sort of thing, Gooris, attends this farewell dinner held by the College Progressive Association that sort of sends him off. And he later gets the ideas of like, you know, Garvey, you know, is important for a great deal of things. You know, he's often quoted saying like, you know, Africa for Africans, Asia for Asians. And I think Mr. Maynard in his interpretation of that, and you see that in a bit of the naming of the AAPA, he quotes Australia for Australians, and by that he's talking to us, he's talking to Gooris, you know. And so that's sort of the antecedents of how the formation of the AAPA emerged. And apologies if I'm missing anything out. Joey? The AAPA had numerous conferences after its first foundation. It had its second conference at Kempsey in 1925. This gathering remains a landmark moment in Aboriginal political history, but sadly little of it is sort of recognised today, hence why I thought it was important to speak on it. The conference was held at Kempsey Showground and ran over 3 days with over 700 Goori people attending. All of the papers were written and delivered by Goori speakers on issues over land, protecting children, health, education, employment and housing. But it was also noted that a lot of the papers were actually delivered in lingo, which, I don't know, when I heard this, it just blew me away. You know, often we're taught, we think of our history, our political history of just 1938, day of the morning, bit of a lull, then Black Power. But to hear, wait a minute, before that, there's these mob, 700 Gooris, like, we can't even get 700 Gooris to rock up for language down the road for what? Anything these days, you know, and let alone fellows who speak in Jangati. After that, though, the APA instigated a massive recruitment drive, and two of the local elders that were asked to address the crowd, followed by the name of James Linwood and John Mosley. It's probably I know some of the people in this room's countrymen. It was stated in the Macleay August that week, It was a remarkable meeting because of the presence of some of the very old Aborigines in the district. Old identities of the Macleay River, they were keen as any in the movement. Mr. James Linwood from Whakarangi Island spoke in the Aboriginal language to the people, urging them to join up and work together in the interests of their own race. Macleay Argus, 4th of July 1925. Later in that year, the AAPA held a conference. They held 7 more, but then immediately after, there were branches established in Nambucca, Barraville, and Urunga. And notably, the mob at Nambucca were some of the staunchest, or some of the most eager. A fellow by the name of John Donovan was quite instrumental in the foundation of that too. I know he remembers him too as well. But the APA was so deadly, they were critical of the government. They were talking about massacres that were happening in the top end. They were talking about child getting removed. They were talking about a whole plethora of things. And even in a letter addressed that Mr. Maynard spoke, he's actually calling out the Premier. He's saying, you fellas don't treat your old people right. Maybe if you learn from us, maybe you could do the same. He sends this long letter. It's pretty deadly. The legacy of the APA. Now we can sort of link a causality within our people's history of resistance, but I'll leave that to someone way more smarter to do that. You know, from the APA, a lot of the old people in that were inspired, like, you know, your great-great-grandfather Beck, Bill Ferguson, Jack Patton, who later, and Pearl Gibbs, were all considered themselves, you know, following in the footsteps of the APA, and certainly without it wouldn't have led to other movements which sort of springboarded from that. It's another chapter of our people's history that is often forgotten, and we must embody that commitment to remember these stories and many more. But from that, we can understand that our language has always played a part in our political resistance, in our people's history. And now I'm going to go into my sort of final segment, I suppose, and that's just going to talk about our current context. And essentially, like all of our languages that we know, our language is standing on the face of the cliff. Historically, when a last speaker dies, your language is set for extinction. We are essentially fighting against all of the monolithic structures of modernity, and unless we take that with seriousness and with thought and intention, I fear we will be swept under. This is just what I believe, though. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I feel immersion is the only way that we can save our language. And I know that to be true. If it works for other mob, and I've seen it in my eyes at the school, seeing kindergartners sing and teach and speak better Gumbaynggirr than probably anyone in 40 years. And I've done the math, I've done the statistics of where we're going, and I'm happy to have a yarn to anyone about it another time. But as what Goa said too, from Aotearoa, I've got 5 apprentices myself. If I can turn them into teachers, and they turn 5 fellows into speakers and teachers, it's 25. Then we'll be right, but we're not there yet. Some of my math sort of stipulates, we've got about 50 speakers-ish. I was going to talk about what is fluency, what isn't fluency, but I don't, that's enough for another time, I feel there's a lot of mythology that gets put on us as Gumbaynggirr people, thinking that our language is deadly and our language is out of the weeds. And I say this, of course, with respect and honour to the position we find ourselves in, that's only due to the long-standing work that has been done by a lot of institutions in the past. But the ball is in our hands, we have to do something with it, because it's our kids' future at stake, it's the future of our community, and yeah, things are really grim. But that's not the point of what I was going to yarn about. Obviously drawing upon an important epistemological framework, the medicine wheel from Turtle Island, and paying mad honour to that. But we know what our commitments are, we know what our cultural responsibilities are, And unless all these Māori come back home now, unless we have a movement that is centric on immersion, unless we have a mass, just like, I think 75, was it going? In Te Maori? 75? Yep. So another thing to note too as well, that Uncle Gary was there at the time. I was going to do another comparison on other international indigenous movements to make this point, but didn't. I just wanted to be to the point. We don't need genocide to kill language. We just need apathy. And why I also wanted to make this yarn is because often I feel in radical spaces, in decolonising spaces, language is seen as very like abstract. Language is seen as very like airy-fairy. It's seen as very like, oh, it's just for doing a welcome or acknowledgement or whatever. But that could be further from the truth. And often, in those spaces of people espousing decolonisation, they're often using references of like Marx and Lenin, but what about our own? And our own can only be accessed through our language. Because when you know language, you can think in it. And unless we're not striving for that, then I see no point. We might as well stop now. We might as well just speak English. If we're not striving for full immersion, then what's the point? And some people can think I'm a bit too heavy duty on that, but we're standing on the edge of the cliff. We know what happens, and I don't know. You? I don't know. Thanks for that. What now?
I don't know. We have one last speaker, but I don't know if there's time for one last speaker. What are those? Puppy dog eyes. What? Huh? Are there questions?
It's not so much a question, like I'm not a linguist or anything like that, but I do have a grip on sometimes common sense. And with this idea of like total immersion, would there not be a small reliance on non-native speaking families to introduce in an easy way, not dialogue or language, but simple words? So you're looking like a word bank type thing. It's very, oh, you're going to, no good. As in, like you're talking, you put it on the wall somewhere with a picture or something, and then there's, as the child is seeing anything, it's, it's seeing things in English or apples or whatnot, it's actually seeing these words. So when they get to this place of kindergarten or Gumbaynggirr school, they have a fragment of it that's just learned incidentally. And you would think a chart would be something, everyone in the postcode, and it becomes that sort of thing. Not the fine tuning.
You're putting a huge amount of responsibility on parents who will not do that.